Hey friends, I'm back to do the third grade blue book called The TV Kid by Katrina Van Horn. Again, if you want to mute me so that you can read the pages alone, that is fine. I'm going to try this again, see how I do here. Television is everywhere. It's been around so long that most people never stop and think about life before TV or wonder how TV came to be. Maybe that's one reason Philo Farnsworth isn't famous. But it's not every day that someone thinks up a world changing idea at age 14. And that's just what Philo did. He was the kid who invented television. That's right. The idea of television picture tube came to Philo when he was still a 14-year-old farm boy. By the time he was 21, he had created a working model of a television. The caption says the television that Philo created looked a lot different from this modern TV. A hard childhood. Philo grew up in a time and place when leisure or free time to play or hang out on the couch barely existed. Born in Indian Springs, Utah in 1906, he had a childhood filled with hard work and hardships. Philo and his family struggled to survive on the new frontier. As the oldest child in the family, Philo not only did farm and household chores, but he also helped take care of the younger kids. He went to school too. He was okay at school, but not great. Nobody thought he was a genius, that's for sure. He seemed like a pretty regular kid. And this is an image of the true Philo T. Farnsworth as a young man. What's an inventor? As Philo got older, he became more and more interested in new inventions. The telephone, for example, seemed pretty amazing back then. Philo couldn't believe someone in another state could talk right into his ear as if she were in the same room. Philo couldn't stop asking his father questions about how it had been invented. His father explained that the telephone and other useful products, such as the light bulb, were created by people who spent their lives developing ideas for new things. These people, he explained, were called inventors. Philo decided an inventor was a pretty great thing to be. He started looking around and thinking about what he could invent. What did people need that didn't exist yet? And the caption for this says, Philo was fascinated by inventions such as the telephone. When Mrs. Heck was younger, we had a telephone exactly like this. Makes me feel old. The lure of science. When Philo's family moved to Idaho to work on a farm, Philo discovered a bunch of science magazines sitting in the attic. During occasional free moments, Philo read every page of these magazines. That's when he first learned about the idea of television. He was fascinated by the notion of sending a picture signal through the air. He spent more and more time thinking about it. Reading about science changed Philo's life. He became extremely curious about how things work, and he felt that he could never learn enough. He became a much better student at school. Still, most of what he learned was from his own reading. And this caption said, Philo read as many books and magazines about science as he could. Getting into gadgets. At age 13, Philo won his first national science contest. He invented a lock that could not be broken by thieves. But Philo was most interested in any kind of gadget that ran with electric power. He wanted to understand how electricity worked. He was so eager to learn about electricity that he asked his chemistry teacher, Justin Tolman, to give him special lessons and allow him to take a class that was meant for kids in the last year of high school. This says the radio was a fairly new electric gadget when Philo was a boy. Mrs. Zek has a radio almost exactly like this. I tell you. According to legend, Philo came up with the idea of electronic television while he was plowing a potato field. As he drove his horse along the field, back and forth among the rows of potatoes, he realized that an electronic beam could scan images the same way, line by line, just as you plow a field or read a book. This caption says that plowing the rows in a field of potatoes may have inspired Philo's idea. This caption says that Philo drew his design on his for his image dissector. It would take some years before it became important. At age 16, Philo drew a design for Tolman that showed, now remember Tolman was his teacher, showed how a device could change electricity into pictures by controlling the speed and direction of electrons, the particles or tiny pieces that make electricity. Philo called his invention an image dissector. His teacher kept the drawing even though it had nothing to do with his class assignment. The drawing turned out to be important years later. The caption for this image I'm going to show you says Philo learned about transmitting pictures by television at Brigham Young University in Utah. After 2 years of high school, Philo started college at Brigham Young University in Utah. While he was there, he studied more about electricity and television picture transmission. When his father died, Philo had to drop out of the university to help support his family. This caption says Philo Farnsworth works on television parts in one of his laboratories. TV is born. In 1926, Philo moved to San Francisco and set up a laboratory in an empty building. He did one experiment after another. On September 7th, 1927, he painted a square of glass black and scratched a straight line on the center. In another room, an assistant dropped the slide between a camera tube and a hot, bright lamp. Philo watched the receiver. They saw the image of the straight line. Then, and his assistant turned the slide 90 degrees and they saw it move. They saw the first electronic television picture ever transmitted. Philo said simply, "There you are, electronic television." It was as if he thought it was the simplest thing in the world to make. This caption says Philo gets an early TV camera ready to transmit a picture. Rivals get ahead of Philo. By the time many other people had started working on ideas for sending pictures electronically, some of them were more successful at making working televisions. They got ahead of Philo and were able to make money on the new technology. But Philo had been the first person with the big idea. By using the drawing of Philo's image dissector, which his high school teacher had kept, Philo was able to prove that he was the real inventor of the television. This caption says Philo Farnsworth adjusts the controls on one of his first television receivers. Philo gets his due. Philo never got rich from his invention, and during his lifetime, he never became famous as the father of television. Philo died in 1971, poor and unhappy that he had never gotten the respect he deserved. In 1985, students and teachers from Utah Elementary School asked the state government to put up a statue in honor of Philo Farnsworth. After all, he was one of the greatest electronic inventors who ever lived. It took them 2 years to get their wish, but in 1987, the year Mrs. Heck graduated from high school, an artist began to make a bronze statue of Philo Farnsworth, and in 1990, the statue was sent to Washington, D.C., where it represents the state of Utah in Statuary Hall in the Capitol. Mrs. Heck was there. She saw Statuary Hall. Pretty exciting stuff. This caption says it would take many years after Philo's invention for him to be honored as the father of television. Today, Philo T. Farnsworth is famous as one of Utah's most important citizens, and everyone finally knows him as the father of television, thanks to that Utah elementary school. Here's a timeline, again, love these timelines, of the life of Philo Farnsworth. And you can see he was born in Indian Springs, Utah in 1906. 1919, he won his first national science contest. 1920, he had an idea for electronic television. 1926, he set up a lab in San Francisco. 1927, he transmitted that first TV picture. And then all the way in 1971, he died in Utah. I want you to know that in my day, when I was younger, that we did not have remote controls. Mrs. Heck was the remote control. Her dad would yell from the other room and ask her to come change the channel. We didn't have very many channels, probably like 3, 5 at the most. And it was the old turn the channel. So it really was turning. Hence the reason turn the channel. All right, so grab your paper and get to work.